I'm Dr. Mark Sue, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Reality Podcast. Join me and our community weekly as we bring you unfiltered health from inflammation to longevity. Real stories, real people, real solutions. Experience real-life health changes from both patients and practitioners, and learn how to turn cutting-edge information into real results in your own life so you can feel better, live longer, live healthier, and be confident and clear in your healthcare choices. Let's get real and get results. All right, everybody, welcome again. This is the Functional Medicine Reality Podcast. I'm Dr. Mark Sue. I'm joined today by Ben Myers, who I'm going to introduce just a little bit more in a second here. But once again, thanks for joining us. We are here, as always, to help be truth tellers and create clarity to help people make better decisions, not only be aware about the tools in functional medicine world, but the applications of them, but also talk about the good, the bad, and sometimes ugly around functional medicine and the more realities of the applications of such. So all that being said, today we're talking with Ben Myers. I've asked him to come on. He is our representative for a supplement company called Microbiome Labs. All right. And this is not a promotional session. This is not a sales pitch session of any sort. We've done this once before. And the reason that we're having someone come on who represents a supplement company is because we as practitioners, my colleagues and I anyway, we learn so freaking much from people like Ben. All right. And so, I've said this to you before, Ben, I'm not just hyping you up. Like you have a lot of information and you see so many other practitioners and you have such a lay of the land of what other practitioners are doing. So we look at these opportunities as sort of networking opportunities, quite honestly, if I haven't said to you before. We learn from you not only about your company and products, but also we learn about what's kind of on the horizon many times with science and research. And also we get a sense without having to spend the effort talking to other practitioners, like what other people are doing. Okay. So the bottom line here is this. If you're checking in today, if you're a practitioner and you know Microbiome Labs, you'll have a sense already of some of the topics that we're going to discuss. But we're not just talking about Microbiome Labs, all right? We're talking about the science behind the topics that Microbiome Labs serves with a lot of their products. Secondly, if you are a practitioner and you're not familiar with Microbiome Labs, all the better. You're going to get an introduction. And, for the sake of, we believe in this company. And so we believe that you and your patients will get benefit from using the products if you choose to do that. More so if you are a patient, right? Then the benefit and intention of this session are two things. One is we want you to get a sense of the power and benefit and application of various supplements that we'll hone in on today. And especially if you're a skeptic, I think you'll get a sense of where a lot of the grounding and foundational principles, the science behind all of this derives from, and why we're so selective about which companies we use and why we're so convicted about the products we use. Otherwise, if you are an individual who is a health enthusiast as a patient or out there in general public, no doubt, I'll just say you're going to find a lot of interesting stuff here, because when we get done with our sort of lunchtime sessions with Ben, my mind is just spinning all over the place, but I'm so fueled and energized, and I'm like, okay, we gotta, like, when can you come back and when can we talk again, right? Because it's just so stimulating and fun on top of everything else. So I'm going to shut up here, Ben. Let me let you introduce yourself, if you will, and I'm sure, a little bit of disclaimer as, being a representative of companies. Let me hand the mic to you.
I appreciate all the kind words. I really do. I do have a big passion for what I do, and I've always seen myself more as an education asset for people who, practitioners who want to learn about the information that I'm privy enough to know about, and through my company. I do have to disclaim, I'm not here on behalf of Microbiome Labs. I'm here on behalf of us having good conversations and you wanting to have a conversation with me. I also want to put a disclaimer up that I am not a certified medical professional. A doctor, I'm not a nurse practitioner. Nothing I say is to be taken as medical advice. I'm here simply to share information and knowledge that I've learned over a lifetime, but mostly as far as my background, believe it or not, I went to school for construction technology management. I never spent a day doing it, because I learned real quickly. I liked talking to people and went into sales. But by the time I was in my mid-30s, my health was bad. And I ended up going into medical sales and out of the sales I was doing because it was just better. And it was more of a passion. And I got lucky enough to go through some companies, most notably Interrogam, was on the forefront of functional medicine. And even back then, we couldn't use the word leaky gut. I was going into gastroenterologist offices and avoiding using the word leaky gut, which we know now is as e-coded as metabolic endotoxemia and therefore very much accepted in modern allopathic medicine, but has been called leaky gut for a long time. And luckily enough, I came across Microbiome Labs, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about who they are and that kind of stuff, but that's kind of my background. It's my rabbit hole I'm passionate about. So I spend a lot of time in trying to make sure I know all I can about what I'm talking to you and other practitioners about to answer those questions and help you with your everyday good work of trying to help other people's overall health.
Yeah, I'm not sure I remembered that you worked with Interrogam. I mean, just to put a little context on it for anybody who's listening who didn't listen to the previous didn't hear the previous session that we did with an individual similar to yourself. We trust her very much. She's with a different supplement company, but we did talk about so Interrogam made, and I just say this to give an example. Again, more speaking to the skeptic here out there. Okay, if to the lay public's a skeptic, Interrogam, correct me if I'm wrong, makes slash made immunolin as a raw ingredient that was a prescription originally. And we tell patients this all the time in the office. Hey, this is a supplement, but it was originally a prescription and then it became a medical food. And then it was under regulation. You can only use up to a certain dosing, under this supplement category. But this was, potent stuff. It used to be a prescription, right? And for people who are skeptics, it's like, wait a second. What do you
Yeah.
mean? This is a supplement. What do you mean it used to be a prescription? How did it become a supplement? Like it puts a whole different spin to someone who's a skeptic.
Yeah, I believe it actually still is available by specialty pharmacy as a prescription for as a prescription medical food. So
I've
there's
never
a
done it before because it's too expensive.
yeah, it's like
And it
$600 or
makes no
something like that.
sense
Yeah.
because you guys so to put it out there really quickly here, you guys and the company from the, other individual we did the podcast recording with from the other supplement company, you guys are the 2 companies I think other companies make it, but you're the only 2 companies we use that has a product with that same immunolin that you used to represent from Interrogam.
We're the 2 major companies that most people would know the names of. There's a few others, and there's a few other companies that use it as an ingredient. They still make, and you're correct, it's called Immunolin, would be the generic, and at 5 grams or above, it is still a prescription medical food because that amount of oral immunoglobulin from serum-derived bovine sourcing couldn't be intaked in a 48-hour ingestion period by a human. Basically, if you sit around and drink bovine serum, you couldn't ingest that much IgG in a 40-hour period. So therefore, it's a medical food. Much like Ensure, you can go to the grocery store and buy Ensure for nutrients, intake over the counter. But if a severe person with nutrient deficiency were to go into the hospital, there is a prescription medical food dosage of Ensure that's only available by prescription.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what we are is that exact same thing. There's a prescription medical food dosage of 5 grams or more of immunolin that is only available by prescription. At less than that, that can be recommended as a supplement and purchased without a prescription. They have
Yeah,
the
like 2
same
point
mechanism of action. I believe it's under 2.5 grams or
yeah,
less
that's what I recall,
is
2.4,
what
yeah,
the supplemental and
yeah.
in use of that, that's pretty much what it is. It's the daily dosing as a supplemental dosing. So, Immunolin's used at 5 grams or above for specific acute needs, and those type of acute patients would continue to take Immunolin at 1 to 2 to 3 grams daily for specific disease states, and that is what the other company and us offer is a daily supplemental version of that prescription medical food.
Right. Yeah. So, not to get ourselves too caught in that
Yeah,
rabbit hole, but it's just
yeah.
I love that topic. I think I've done some social media posts around that too. I love that particular topic with immunolin because it is such you can't argue against when people say like supplements all suck. They're not worth it or whatever else. I'm like, let me just tell you about one example.
Yeah.
And not that not most supplements don't have that kind of background by any means, but you can't argue against it, right? I mean, this is like a legit FDA regulated prescription. It's just when it's all like semantics and regulations. When you stick it under this kind of category and that dosing, then it goes under the supplement category, but it's actually a prescription as well, right? It just reframes things for the people who are skeptics, and I'm always talking to the skeptic in my head. So anyway,
There's adequate reasons to be skeptical on a lot of things, especially with everything we see on, the social media platforms and some of the claims that are being thrown out and, names that are being dropped on specific things. It makes the whole industry very cloudy on who to trust, who's out there making claims and who's not making claims and who's backable. But there definitely is a medical grade efficacy shown portion of the supplement industry that has scientific backing. And we can go into a lot of the stuff of how Microbiome Labs has helped push that forward. It's one of the reasons I love working for them is we do that. We're one of those companies, and there's other ones out there as well that do that.
And that's what, so I will propose we don't need to go into that rabbit hole here today because in the previous recording with Leah
Mhm,
from the other company, we
mhm,
went into more of that stuff, like on an industry level,
mhm,
the sort of like regulations and certifications and stuff like that. And so as I said there, and I think I've said in other social media posts, like it just, if I'm a lay person, knowing what I know, if I'm a lay person, like how the heck am I supposed to know which companies to trust or not trust or whatever else? And, everyone's saying different things,
mhm,
this credibility sources. But as a practitioner, if I'm talking to, say, like a mainstream practitioner colleague, they're going
mhm.
to have a lot of the same questions, right? They're going to feel like, well, it's not regulated and you don't know what you're getting and blah, blah. But it takes some work and effort. But once you step in and have some of those conversations, if you care enough to, as a practitioner, and have the heart and the mission to want to, and then, to help patients, it's not actually that hard in the big picture to get comfortable and learn, and some of it is like there's a trust element, no doubt, but Microbiome Labs is one of those companies, as I've said before, that we have trust in because of the very things that you said. So
Well,
having said that,
to your
like,
point real quick though, like,
yeah,
I would definitely say for the people listening that are that are patients or consumers or the general public, I have always said the best source for information for them is their practitioner, is someone like you, a trained medical professional who has the ability to look through and see, well, is somebody actually presenting research or is somebody just making a lot of claims? And so to go to a medical professional and ask their advice, even if it's something you're not using to look over, versus taking what you see online as truth is a much better way to handle your own health than it is
and I
just
think
to try things you see online.
and I think that's where some of the good, bad, ugly, the ugly sort of comes in here in my opinion, because it's then it's work, right? I mean,
Yeah.
or it's a little like you gotta make an appointment. There's a cost involved a lot of times with the functional practitioners. They don't really take insurance, and then there's the like appointment time that could be who knows how far down the road. It's a lot easier when we have the fingertip information, quote unquote, even if it's not really as credible or whatever from social media, right? And a lot of the social media information is coming from practitioners also. But
Mhm.
then we get that situation where you and I both know, right? And I'm not trying to throw shade. It's just, a lot of practitioners, I'll say we, okay, because I'm a practitioner too.
Yeah.
There's some ulterior motives there from practitioners too, right?
Mhm.
Because there's money involved,
Yep.
right? It's not just about sort of trying to establish business with it, or if you will, or patient care. Then over time, there's been an evolution towards financial gain from selling the supplements.
Mhm.
And so it's not easy. I'm just going to say it to be transparent. It's not easy. If I'm a layperson, knowing what I know, it is not easy to at all to discern all these different factors and variables that are influencing the information that I'm getting, and it's far from transparent. So it is hard, but it's not to minimize. I don't detract from what you said. That information with practitioners having a ideally, if people have a trustworthy relationship with some kind of practitioner, and again, for me, I've said it before, it doesn't even absolutely have to be a prescribing practitioner, right? It could be a nutritionist, health coach, whatever. You've worked with a lot of these folks as well. These sort of like what we might call ancillary or sort of paramedical professional um, roles. They're more and more helpful and necessary, but it's just having the trust with whoever it is, and hopefully that practitioner is transparent and has enough self-awareness and knows the limitations, myself included, to know if I don't know the answer, I'm not gonna, like, lead you down the wrong road. I'm gonna help you, direct you, or find you the right answer because I can't be that person.
I have
Hopefully.
found that exact thing one of the most helpful things in my career and being more of an educator than a salesperson. And I give so many young people that same advice. And I'm sure you've noticed it when I've talked to you and you've had a question. My response, if I don't know, is I don't know that, but I'll find the answer out to for you. And that helps me. That's one of my great parts about my job is I get asked questions that I don't know the answer to, and that gets me to go do the research, go jump down a new rabbit hole and go find out what that answer is, and you get to learn and grow more and be more helpful to others.
Yeah, and that's why you enjoy what you do. I mean, and again, you're one of those people, like, you don't know, but a colleague in Connecticut, okay, I won't say here because I don't, just for privacy, but,
Okay.
she and I talk on a most almost weekly basis, and you came up last week. Okay, I don't remember why it wasn't about this recording. Okay, but
Okay.
she said something. She said the same thing. She was like, "Oh, Ben, I love Ben. I love Ben. He's a wealth of information. Like, he brings energy every time, and I learned so much from him." I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about, right?
I appreciate you'll have to tell
You
me
are,
offline who that
you know,
was.
kudos to you for deciding to make a change into doing something that is, that you're passionate about. Because I say to people all the time that the percentage of people in America who actually enjoy what they do for work, much less actually really enjoy or love what they do for work, is so small, right? And a lot of times there's compromises to finding that lane because it's harder or doesn't make as much money or whatever the case may be. So kudos to you,
Mm,
and we're benefiting from it. So thank you.
well, thank you, thank you. I'm glad I didn't pick the construction technology management path. I get to love
Yeah,
what I do, so it's not
yeah.
work.
It's just not your lane per se.
Yeah.
So let's jump into a couple questions I was thinking about to throw your way. So let's go ahead and start with gut health, right? I mean, quick background. How I came across Microbiome Labs is from who I think was the founder, right? Kieran?
Yeah, Quran or
Karan. I'm sorry, I said Karan. Okay. So I saw him present. So this gentleman, I saw him present. I've seen him present many times. Just saw him at the A4M conference, in December of 2025 as well, just around the conference, et cetera. Nonetheless, heard him present at a conference called the Forum for Integrative Medicine, TFIM. I believe that was the first time I heard him. It was probably, I don't know, 2018 or something like that. Okay. It was before a pandemic for sure. And so I mentioned to you, he presented on nowadays I mention this because some people who are health enthusiasts, the practitioners will definitely know this term, Akkermansia. All right. Akkermansia is this strain of bacteria in the gut. And he was talking about it being a cornerstone bacteria. All right. I'm not saying he came up with this, but he's a microbiologist researcher by background. Am I right?
correct, yeah, that's we were founded by Quran, who is a microbiologist who previously did research and patented strains and sold those to companies that are now our competitors, as far as if you want to say competitors or other companies in the space. And then he partnered with Dr. Tom, who was a functional medicine doctor who was wanting to start a company that was based on science. And you hear that a lot, but I'll let you finish on if you want to finish on your how you came
Sure.
about to us.
Well, I just was impressed with him, right? Just by the information, he seemed very transparent and integral, and again, it was all science based about again back to leaky gut and otherwise, right? That we need Akkermansia in order to build a healthier microbiome more sustainably and more effectively, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so that's the basis, and then we got to become familiar with Microbiome Labs, and then over time with yourself, and there's just a lot of great data behind the microbiome products, which gave us great confidence up front. Because again, I'm a skeptic at heart. So, given that gut health is the basis and foundation, in my view, my POV for Microbiome Labs, pretty sure that's true. I'm pretty sure you would agree.
I agree. It's a fundamental way of how the entire body functions.
Sure. So given that gut health is such a foundational staple, both to, all things start in the gut, right? Is people talk about that a lot. I think it was Socrates said that, but practitioners say that all the time, especially in the functional medicine world, right? And given the evolution over the many years, but it's just faster and faster, the gut-brain axis, the gut hormone axis, leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky gut, leaky heart, these are all like terms that we throw around to illustrate the point, but there's science behind all of this, okay? But for me, so coming out again, a little bit of a sort of skeptical side, if you will, for me, when I'm talking to patients regularly about a variety of symptoms and topics, right? People will say to me all the time, I'm working on my gut. I'm working on my gut. And I have no idea what they're talking about, right? Some people, what I mean is some people, when they say they're working on the gut, they're trying to eat more fruits or vegetables, or they're actually just taking fiber. It could be over the counter fiber. It could be a professional grade supplement fiber, whatever, but it could mean anything and everything, right? And then someone could say, I have anxiety and I read about this, about the gut brain axis, and I'm working on my gut. But what I'm getting at here is this. Here's a statement. I'm going to ask you to kind of sound back on it. The analytical side of my brain says, yeah, we have all this research, all this data, but the specifics of the application of that data towards gut health is still kind of murky and not really ready for prime time in most cases. In most cases. Okay. And so the question is like, how much do you agree or disagree with that statement? Right. I am a big believer in probiotics. I've said to everybody, mainstream population health level for America, right? If there's three things that I would recommend for everybody, it's not in rank order: probiotics, vitamin D, and fish oil. If I'm just for the general public, everybody across the board. But I'm not going to tell people, like, if you take probiotics of any kind, whether it's Microbiome Labs or someone else's, I'm not telling you that just because you're taking that, you're going to be able to definitely avoid this, or you're definitely going to feel better in this way or get better in that way. And even if the person says, oh, I found research data that says, hey, I did that stool test and I'm low in this species and that species is in that product that I'm taking, but that's not a direct predictable outcome. That's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah,
Is
you're 100% correct, and what you're describing is basically where 10 years ago, Karan and Dr. Tom were sitting at, um, and why they made Microbiome Labs in general. Jeffrey Bland, whose name's very, very well known, was very much towards this idea 25 years ago, and it's been humps and hurdles to get to where we're at now. But even 10 years ago, the majority of research was and in a lot of cases still is done by microbiologists who that's their job. And that's what Karan used to do. He was a microbiologist who would look for strains that did specific things and show scientifically that those strains did those, what the mechanism, what that species or that strain, what its functionality was. Now, what other supplement companies would do back then would be to go purchase one strain off of this microbiologist that had good research on it, and another one off another microbiologist, and another one off another, with the idea that we're going to put all of these in a broad spectrum probiotic and make the level a certain amount of billion CF. And and then make the claim that if we take this daily, it should help our gut. And much like you were saying, that's where you hear a lot of people say, I'm working on my gut. And what I think is lost in a lot, especially in the general public, and even a lot of practitioners that I go and talk to, is what exactly gut functionality is and what the three types of probiotics are and what they can do. So probiotics are basically one of three types. Either one, they're transient, meaning as they travel through the body, the dendritic cells and immune cells that are in your body sampling everything that comes in, see those things, sample those, and have a positive or negative response. So your immune system, your enteric nervous system, for the most part, is completely made there. All the neurotransmitters, all the short-chain fatty acids, all the metabolites and things like that, for the most part, are all made in your gut because of what your body's doing. And when those dendritic cells see a specific strain, they'll direct your immune system or your enteric nervous system or XYZ system to do something specific. And that's a transient probiotic, and they can be very helpful. We have several of them. Gut brain.
just to quick summarize, clarify for a couple terms. So dendritic cells are a type of white blood cell.
Mhm,
So it's part of the immune system. And when you say enteric, we're talking about gut.
mhm.
So you're talking about immune cells specifically in the gut, these dendritic cells, and you're basically saying, for the lay public here,
Yes,
especially. So yeah, we take these probiotics that are transient or temporary, like they flow through kind of quickly, but
correct.
they're kind of sending signals and to the immune system. The immune system then takes that information, then sends further signals to regulate.
Exactly. Very good way to say that in a way that's more understandable. And they can be very positive in that way. However, as they finish going through your system, you take them in a capsule, they go through, and then they exit your body naturally. And while you're taking them, they have positive effects. And we have several of those in our category, and they can do lots of good things, but they don't make permanent changes in anything for the most part. The second type is a probiotic that's going to specifically do a specific function. So,
So
for instance,
before we go on, sorry.
yeah,
So if it's not something that makes a permanent benefit, so can you just entertain us for a second? What's a primary or top two reasons people would take that just temporarily? Like the skeptic here might say like, sounds like a Band-Aid.
yeah.
Like
So
you got to keep taking it forever. What's the point?
that's honestly one of the things we talk about. If it if it's a transient and it's temporary, it doesn't solve an underlying cause. And that's where I was going to it, where Megaspore and what Quran figured out was a major difference. Actually fixing the
Why would people take that? Or are you saying yeah, that's also like passe, and that's what we've gotten away from in the more professional grade, better quality probiotics because it doesn't have enough benefit long term. Is that what you're
correct.
saying?
So there are specific things that can be done. So for instance, like a Zenbiome gut brain reset. It is a Bifidobacteria longum 1714 strain, and it ends chronic cortisol expression, reestablishes gut brain signaling, and changes tryptophan metabolism into serotonin and melatonin by blocking the kernine pathway. That was a whole lot of stuff, and we can dig into that, what those all mean later if we want to. But we also know when we stop taking that, during a washout period in a human clinical trials, all those things go back. So what we need to do is fix the underlying cause because of that. It's without going into a bunch of details, it's why we see a lot of probiotic interventions and things like SIBO and stuff like that that make a good change but reoccur.
So going back, as far as like, are you saying that these temporary probiotic benefits, the temporary benefits we can get from this first class of probiotics, are you saying there really isn't as much benefit for them anymore, or are you? And this is just where we started from in the evolution and history probiotic industry.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
so you're not
basically
you're
where
not
it's
saying that.
kinda where we started, and we didn't
Okay,
realize back then that
okay,
this was temporary and it wasn't making a permanent change, but at the same time, a lot of the companies knew, well, as long as they take it all on
yeah,
a regular basis, they feel better, and
yeah.
as a business model, that's a great thing to give somebody that makes them feel better, function better, that they can never stop taking.
So let me ask you that because I was thinking already. I didn't know if you were going to say, "Well, yeah, no." There's times that we want that just transient benefit because someone's going through like traveler's diarrhea or C.
Correct.
diff and they're in the hospital or whatever. Like I could think of those kind of
Oh, yeah,
scenarios, right?
and that's a great example. So, yes, I should say there are reasons to take transient probiotics. We have ones that like I said, we have ones that we take that with the optimal reason to take them isn't a permanent or chronic condition. They're fixing something temporary. For instance, during weight loss, taking Akkermansia can be very helpful. Now, taking Akkermansia doesn't increase the Akkermansia population permanently in your gut. But while you're taking it, what that Akkermansia does for someone, for instance, who's losing weight and on a with a dietitian and they're going through that whole process, is very beneficial. Repopulate the gut with Akkermansia where you never have to take it again.
And by the way, I'm just gonna it's a quick sidebar. I didn't say it earlier, but I mentioned with Quran and Akkermansia where I first heard that the cornerstone bacteria. That's in the trend. That's trending these days because it's such a topic with the whole weight loss, as you said, GLP-1s, and
Mhm.
there's even a company or more that are touting and sort of branding their probiotics specifically for weight loss because of just heightening Akkermansia. So anyway,
Yeah,
just a quick side
it
note,
is a
but
huge
connection full
topic.
circle.
It's actually funny with Quran and that, um, and we can get towards all of this later if we want to. We had to go back when Ackerman C became very popular about 2 years ago. Quran actually went back through his old studies on Megaspore with Megapre, and Megaspore is a for rebalancing the microbiome, reducing inflammation, creating a new environment that's balanced and functional in the microbiome itself. And then Megapre, he went through and looked for specific prebiotic oligosaccharide fibers that feed those good commensal bacteria in order to regrow them. So the
And
gut is
again,
like the
Mega just for
garden.
everyone, Mega Probiotic and Mega Pre are 2 products that
Yeah.
Microbiome Labs makes. So
Yes.
yeah. Yep.
And so he went back through and went, well, Akkermansia, yeah. And he kind of sat there and thought, I wonder what happened in our study because we didn't specifically document it in our findings when you take Megaspore and then you follow that with our prebiotic, our probiotic followed by our prebiotic. And he went, well, we got to put this data out there because it increased natural Akkermansia by feeding the Akkermansia that was in your gut already. It increased it by 8,000%. So we kind of went, well, wait a second. Why would you pay to continually take when you could actually fix the environment and then feed the Akkermansia so that they grow and take up more space naturally than to take that ongoingly. So again, that's a difference of the old way of thinking, or shouldn't say the old way, a previous way that was most popular of
Well, it is
transient
older.
probiotics and taking them constantly versus what spores and Quran was able to show with Megaspore, which ends up being why don't we fix the actual underlying cause and heal the environment?
So this is a natural segue back into bringing us back into your category 2,
Yes,
right? The category 2 are go ahead.
category 2 is basically probiotics who, when taken, are going to do a specific function themselves. So Ackerman C would actually be a better example of that. You're taking Ackerman C not because the body's sampling it, but because once it's there, it's going to do something positive in its environment because it naturally does. And that's going to be beneficial to the patient. But once again, it's doing that while it's going through the body. It's not going to stay. There are some examples now that we have found. 15 years ago, I don't think they had a single example of a probiotic that, when taken, naturally commensulate and repopulated in the gut. There are actually some that are out there now that can be done that, but most people, I think, when they're tuning into social media or they're thinking about probiotics, even as medical professionals, that somehow when they're taking a probiotic, they're adding this permanently to the person's ecosystem. inside their gut. And that's just, we've learned it's not the case. So that moves to the third type of probiotics, which is spores. And that's where Quran really was the pioneer by inventing a way to get spores to open up, be able to be fermented, closed, and then open up again in the microbiome. And the big difference between spores and those two other things is one, it was nature's actual evolutionary way for a bacterium to make it inside the human gut. There's spores that are natural to soil. There's spores that are natural to other environments. He collected his from healthy human microbiomes for what they were doing specifically. And what spore refers to is not fungus or mold. It's simply the name given to genus of bacteria who realized and evolved to form a casing shell around themselves and go into like a hibernative, non functioning stasis for up to millions of years, and then open back up and spring back to life. And
Yeah,
since
I've always thought of them just like seeds.
they're kind of like a seed, but seeds, once they become a plant, don't come back to a seed, and go back into their shell, but very similar. The big difference would be when me or you ingest a spore or anyone, and they make it to the stomach acidity and small intestine, they literally hitting a pH and environment that's different than the outside world, and that wakes them up. And they put little receptors that stick outside that shell to kind of test the waters and see where they're at. And since ours are derived from healthy human gut, you have in everybody's body out there, you have receptors in your lumen, in your intestines, that reach out and grab onto spores specifically. And they basically give them a little handshake and say, yep, you're right. You're in a healthy human gut. You're in a gut. Go ahead and open up and come to life. And they do. They shed, they open up, and they do what's called quorum sensing, which in for the general audience basically means they evaluate their environment and depicting on what signaling and what they see as around them in that little micro universe, it depicts what actions they're going to take that they're capable of. For instance, our Bacillus subtilis 8, which we have patented, makes up to 24 natural antibiotics and antimicrobials. It literally
Can I just
makes
stop for a
natural
second? Like,
antibiotics.
it's just funny how you just roll that right off your tongue. Like, say that again.
Which one? The Bacillus
Blah, 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 1824.
Bacillus subtilis A258. That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That is a great educational moment that blows my mind how much I say and I don't realize other people may not realize.
It's what you do, but I mean, it's a reflection of
Taxonomy.
like how bright you are. And I mean, I'm going to say right front, like, I've never said to you, I don't know if I'll ever learn all these different strains of all the bacteria in the guts, right? Like for me, it's like Star Wars. I
Mhm.
mean, we talked about this last time you were here, when you're talking about, oh, this strain of like a H2579 or whatever else,
Mhm.
right? And then I'm like, okay, what's the difference between that one labeled as such and this product versus that product? Like it's all like Star Wars codes for
Mhm.
me. Okay, I'm just being transparent here.
Yeah,
I'm
and
trying my
a
best,
good
but
way, a
I'm
good thing.
not one of those savants who just remembers all the codes. Okay, so you just rattle them off your tongue. It's just entertaining. But go ahead.
I
Sorry.
talk about them on a regular basis. So
Yeah.
trust me, other companies' numbers and strains, I'm not as able to roll off that way. But you bring up a good point. One thing that everyone should realize, and I wish was spread out more, was exactly what those mean. Because so many people go to XYZ pharmacy or supermarket and pick up a probiotic bottle and look on the back and say, well, that's familiar. I know this name, whether it's Bacillus subtilis or not. That we've really in Quran helped bring about was doing human clinical trials and functionality clinical trials and published papers that are peer reviewed on specific strains. And what that means is in the words Bacillus subtilis HU58. That means that of the genus in taxonomy back from junior high school of kingdom, phylum, family, class, genus, species, strain, XYZ, dogs are all of the canine species. However, Chihuahua, a hyena, and a wolf, and a Saint Bernard would all do different things if put into a room full of people. And so you really want to have, if you're going to pick a canine to be your pet, you really want to be specific on what strain of the canine species you're going to go out and bring into your home. They're all of a different. So Bacillus is a
Hey, great
genus of
great illustration, by the way. Love it.
yeah, Bacillus is a genus of bacteria that all have several, have things in common in that taxonomy tree. Subtilis is the species. So it's a single species of that genus. Strain, is it a chihuahua? Is it a wolf? Is it a coyote? Is it a hyena? What is it? HU means Hollandaise University, which is located in London, England, and it's strain number 58. And that strain is patented because that strain does something very specific that strain number 57 and 56 and 55, none of them do. So just like the dog analogy, we're looking at a specifically specialized version of a species that does something very specific. And that's where you see a lot of even practitioners and medical doctors that are not aware that when they see a research paper on a specific bacteria, that just because those Bacillus subtilis, that genus and species name, may be the same as the research paper they saw, it doesn't mean that that probiotic in that bottle or that they're looking at does any of what that other research they showed does. And unfortunately, you do see lots of people, or just lots of entities, use that little loophole or gray area to make claims and stuff. And that's where you got to be very careful and try and talk to a medical professional, because that tends to be a good way that people make a lot of claims on products that don't necessarily or may not be true. Um,
So if I can pull out just for a second, like summarize, right? Because that was a lot of great info. And so in application form, like in real life where the rubber hits the road, right?
mm,
I could have 3 patients who are all say they have like quote unquote IBS,
mm,
right? Irritable bowel syndrome. Let's say they all have very similar life experiences. So one person's saying, yeah, I'm working on my gut and they're taking a probiotic of some sort, right? But it's a categorically for all comers who have IBS, I can say with confidence and feel good to say you will benefit from a probiotic. But if you have IBS of a specific kind of symptomatology or due to a specific kind of mechanism or a couple mechanisms that we can identify, and if we happen to have data that says, hey, people who have that kind of mechanism, either in symptomatology or in a marker, we happen to also know that if you use Bacillus subtilis 58, that there's predictable outcome that you will feel better and get better. But if somebody else is a third patient's like, well, yeah, I have the exact same symptoms and I'm taking a probiotic and it does say Bacillus subtilis, but it's not the HU58 version, it's HU24, they may not have the same outcome, right? And then we got people like throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like you got some people who are like, oh, I took Bacillus subtilis and it didn't help me. Well, but unfortunately it's the wrong one, or it wasn't the one we had the predictable outcome for. And then you have other people like, oh, I took a probiotic, it didn't do anything for me. Well, was it like a dead strains that you got over the counter? Was it even does it even have Bacillus subtilis, whatever? I mean, the part that's ugly for me is that it's a reflection that we have so much information now that it's almost a little overwhelming, because then the more you know, the more you're sort of obligated to know even more, and then it gets so granular. But to learn all that is not easy.
very much not easy.
But at the same time, it also speaks to, well, we can't just generalize and say, well, probiotics didn't help me,
Mhm.
or that they're not
Exactly, 'cause
worthwhile, or they're being skeptic, like, oh, they all suck or whatever.
yeah, and unfortunately, and especially with practitioners that have been in the medical health for decades, lived through a time where we couldn't even look down to see what a strain was, that all the data was just on species. So as a worldwide commerce, probiotics just had species. They didn't have a specific strain. And now we know that strain matters. Our Zenbiome gut brain reset is 2 different strains of the same Bifidobacteria longum, and both of them do completely different things. You can buy each one of them individually. One's for IBS, diarrhea, and constipation. One's for resetting the gut-brain axis and reducing stress, anxiety, and improving sleep and reducing depression. Both of them do completely different things. And if you look under a microscope, they look completely different. But 20 years ago, they could have easily both been in the same probiotic or interchanged, and nobody would have known the difference, because they didn't understand what the specificity and what the difference between this strain to that strain did.
So I guess to try to create that and put some more tangent take-home messages around what I just said, it's not to part of it. Someone could interpret what I just said as, yeah, it's all too complicated. But I guess what I'm just reflecting on is, number one, there is a lot of research that is, I mean, we all know, I think we could all agree, no matter who we are listening or you and I, that research around the microbiome and gut health matters has just continued to accelerate and explode over the last decade, and it's just continuing, right? It's not going the other way. Having said that, the primetime application of the information that is amassing so far, there's still a lot to be learned and put into action. And so we're in that place right now, as with a lot of things in health, where we have a lot of information, but the application of such is still kind of to be to determine. But it doesn't mean we just wait and fiddle our thumbs and wait for perfection of the information. We can still take action. We just have to be, I would argue, and tell me what you think, we need to be just mindful about our expectations as both practitioners and as patients, right?
Mhm.
I could recommend probiotics for everybody, but if you have a specific gut issue, then okay, do we have enough data to say this is going to predictably benefit you? Even if not, you're still going to benefit from the totality of the data about microbiome benefit from probiotics of whichever sort, the category 2, category 3. But we want to be clear about expectations so that we don't go, oh, that didn't work and toss out the window per se.
Yeah, very much so. Just because we don't know everything doesn't mean to stand still and wait for that all to come about. We have decades before we're going to find out what every microbe in the universe does, if not hundreds of years. It's too vast to stop. And we know that overall, there's lots of good benefits that we're getting. And for the most part, don't get scared and say that since I don't know something, I'm not going to try and do something positive for my health. That's not what I would advocate at all. What we're more looking at now is specificity on what exactly can we do. And that's what the fun part about what I'm learning in the last 5 years, 6 years is the specificity. So for instance, like I said, taking probiotics daily has a positive benefit. We're looking into now is what can a physician like yourself, what data can we get you on what a strain does that can do something very, very specific and acute and, sharpshooter versus, a grenade approach, instead of saying overall, what can we do for clinical application? And that's what's fascinating right now is with Megaspore, what we showed was, and to my knowledge, it's still the only probiotic to say this, we can actually reverse and make the garden of the microbiome functioning again and reduce inflammation throughout the body. That gave the ability to basically connect to all the systems from the gut. So when the gut's functioning correctly, because like you had said earlier, that affects the entire nervous system, the immune system, all of those systems, and those are all connected to your lungs, your heart, your skin, your brain, your liver, all of those things. But we're looking at specific strains now and getting into what they can actually do acutely. And that is fascinating. The idea of actually being able to, and I got to be very careful with the words I say, to have a specific acute result by taking a specific strain of bacteria that does something very unique. For instance, our PyloGuard, it velcros onto H. pylori. We went through 700 strains and we found the outside of one that literally velcros to something bad. And it's like, oh wow, that's so unique of something that's already in Mother Nature that solves a problem that previously only had a solution that did a lot of harm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're talking about precision medicine or personalized medicine as time goes on and more
Mhm.
information is gathered. But at the same time, again, I try to advocate to patients that the totality of data about probiotics for gut health is so established that there's still benefit on that foundational level. And then it's more of a question of whether we can get an expected outcome with specific needs or symptoms with a more, as you say, sharpshooter approach with specific strains. So if that's the case, how about we take a pivot here? So if we kind of land the last two, we go in the direction of two more topics,
Sure,
I'll propose.
sure.
And we go down this road here of more precise therapies now. Okay. So probiotics. So let's stay on that for a second. We go down the road of two specific targeted therapies. You have now, and I'll say, so one of those topics is psychobiotics. Okay, so I did a social media post on that some time ago, but because I love that, it's just a fun term to say. Okay,
It is.
so you have now like three times alluded to in this so far the Zen biome,
ZenBiome.
right? So let's talk about for a second probiotics and just a little bit without getting too technical on the precision of those specific strains for mental health as measured outcomes from improving gut terrain through the microbiome, which I just love talking. Again, it's another one of those like talking to the skeptics, like hey, look at this data, randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials. Like, what more are you going to ask for, right? And then we want to pivot, and lastly, to a bit of the vaginal microbiome and what's come down the road recently with that. Time, distribution at your discretion here, but yeah, why don't we start with the psychobiotics for a second?
Yeah, so our ZenBiome line, there's a cope, sleep, and gut brain reset. They all contain the single strain Bifidobacterial longum 1714. And again, another big ramble off on things. Just 1714 is the thing to remember, is in all of those. And it is scientifically fascinating probiotic. And they literally found it through research on looking in healthy human guts who literally handled stress, anxiety, never got depressed, happy go lucky, great sleep schedules. And they went, wait a second, let's see if all these people have something in common. And they all had this same 1714 strain. So they pulled it out and they said, let's see what it does. And they went, wow, if we recreate this and put this in somebody else's microbiome, well, the same thing happened. And it did. And so we have multiple human clinical trials now showing everything from reduction of stress, anxiety, depression markers, and quality of life to an increasing quality of sleep. And the 1714 strain does something very specific. It's a transient probiotic, like we mentioned earlier, as that goes through the body, the immune system and dendritic cells sample it. And it has three main things. One, it reestablishes signaling between the gut and the brain. And like we had said, their system connects. The gut and the brain is more than just a system connect. The stem cell that we all have when we're all in utero and stem cells are splitting, the cell that becomes your brain and the stem cell that becomes your gut are actually one, and they split, and there's a vagal nerve that connects them, and that literally signals for your entire life. And that's how they talk back and forth, and that can become encumbered as well as what's called the HPA axis, in getting in the weeds. So the first thing it does is it reestablishes your gut and your brain talking to each other. The second thing it does is it can end chronic cortisol expression. Cortisol builds
And right
up.
now, you're talking about the 1714.
1714 strain, your body
Yeah.
sees
Okay.
it and it says, wait a second, I need to go take a look at cortisol. Wait a second, we're making way too much cortisol in the morning and we've got all these peaks during the day. It evens that out and gets the body to start creating and regulating cortisol correctly again. And the reason is cortisol negatively affects your brain, cortisol negatively affects your gut, and so it regulates that. The third is the most important thing it does. It actually changes the way that the tryptophan your body makes metabolized. So we all make tryptophan, we get it in turkey on Thanksgiving, but your body makes it every single day. And that's one of the ways your body gets serotonin and melatonin. And most people know serotonin. People take drugs to get more serotonin because of its effects, but it does lots of things in the body. And melatonin, we know a lot of people take melatonin, supplementally as well at the grocery store for all the things it does with sleep and calmness stuff as well. Your body makes that out of tryptophan. But if you have leaky gut, if you have systemic inflammation, the body can force that, your immune system can force that metabolism of tryptophan to go down what's called the quinine pathway. And that can turn into quinolinic acid. And quinoline is something that you can test for in blood tests. You can do Dutch testing, which tests over a period of time to see if that quinine is raised. We're actually,
I'm not sure it's available in typical conventional testing.
no,
I'm not
it's
aware of that.
something you by
Organic
prescription.
acid testing of all kinds of companies, or like you say, the Dutch hormone testing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in a bunch of functional panels.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of practitioners would be would know, but the general public would probably be not. That this is a measurable thing that can be related and shown towards stress, anxiety, and all those things we're talking about. And when the body sees the 1714 strain, one of its mechanisms, it tells the body to start making a metabolite that blocks that quinine pathway. So when you're taking 1714 every day for a number of weeks, the body slowly quits making as much quinolinic acid and quinoline, which causes that anxiety stress, and starts making more serotonin and melatonin. And and over a period of time, when we have more serotonin and melatonin and less quinolinic acid, the natural reaction is the body is going to be less depressed, less anxiety, have better sleep quality. And that's a great example and that's a true psychobiotic. So that 1714 strain was the first psychobiotic to actually break that barrier and say, we have peer-reviewed, double-blind placebo, human clinical trials showing this happens. They actually went further, and a well-known European psychiatrist tried to prove that it was phooey, I guess a good way to say it. So did a 4-week study doing brainwave pattern scanning while putting people through stressors, and literally after 3 weeks called Karan up and said, I got to pull books off the shelf. He's like, you actually changed brainwave patterns in less than 4 weeks when people are put in stressful situations. You're changing the brainwave patterns of these patients because of those mechanisms of action. You don't take the probiotic and then your brainwave changes, but that change in what you're doing with tryptophan and cortisol and that signaling over time changes the way your body and your brain handles stressors when it's brought into it. That's a
It's so cool.
phenomenal thing to say as far as, like you were saying, a that what
Cool.
we can do now with specific strains and the research out there.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm guessing so this is I'm guessing that's like that's more sort of unpublished or inside information, if you will, right? Shop talk.
No, you can actually go watch all you can I could send to you those
I
clinical
mean
trials.
that brainwave that was actually put out there to the public.
I'm almost positive that one, yeah, I'd have to go back
Okay,
and look at the thing, but I mean, I don't wanna give the doctor's name because I don't know if I have
sure.
the,
Yeah, yeah.
authority to. I'd have to look at it. I'm almost positive that was published and available on PubMed.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
It was more my curiosity because I was thinking that was another example when like I'd never heard that story before, but there's a number of those kinds of stories that things never hit publication.
mhm,
They never hit like conference presentation. Even they're sort of known and documented, but not publicly released information. And then it's a matter of how much we, as practitioners or professionals, like learn these things from each other, and and then it becomes a trust value topic. But
yeah.
nonetheless,
I
cool,
think we're
very
at
cool
4 to
info.
5 human clinical trials that have been peer reviewed, published, and given a p-value to show that just like drug companies do, we go through all those same steps and show this is scientifically significant and replicable, which is important. That's a big thing like you were talking about, efficacy and believability is there are companies out there like us, not just us, that do that. They take their product and they put it through the same rigor a drug would so that we know what to expect and not a overall idea of what could happen.
When I talk to patients about conventional versus functional medicine,
Mhm,
I say conventional mainstream medicine is very limited in tools comparatively,
mhm,
but it's very predictable because they
mhm.
spend a lot of time and money and effort to isolate as many variables. So it's a lot more predictable in outcome.
Yes.
Functional medicine tools, much, much broader in possibilities and options, but it's less predictable. There are some things that are much more predictable, but there's a lot of pieces that aren't so predictable.
Mhm.
Thankfully, functional medicine, we're not talking about like you're in the ER, you just broke your leg, you had trauma, and we're not talking about acute management for the most part. We're much more chronic. So we have room to kind of, explore the different directions if we don't have more predictable outcomes. But there are areas like you're describing here, like with Zen Biome and psychobiotics, that there is predictability many times. It's just a matter of how we as practitioners or in social media, whatever, are presenting that as this is much more predictable. And other times people are kind of exaggerating the claims or creating some hard to meet expectations.
I love your analogy. I'm gonna steal that from you and use that as far as
You
allopathic
got it.
and traditional versus functional. That's a good way of, making that visual and understandable.
And
Well,
that's why
you're
so
right.
now this is why I'm asking you to go into these because we started out by talking about, hey, robotics, there's still a lot to come, right?
Mhm.
Still beneficial for everybody, I'll argue. And it's evolved over time from these sort of like just transient to more, hey, we can actually more sustainably alter the environment for better, right? And now into the spore-botics, et cetera. But now shifting over to a couple pieces of some products and outcomes that are much more predictable. So you've talked about the psychobiotics, and then do you wanna anything more you wanna say on that, or should we shift to the vaginal microbiome topic?
I think a fun little side note on that because we have three of products. One's a cope, one's a sleep, one's uh, um, called gut brain reset. The cope and the sleep are simply just do I want to take the 1714 strain in the daytime or at night? The
Okay.
third one, the gut brain reset, kind of tops on what you're talking about. It adds in a second strain, which is the same exact Bifidobacterial longum species, but a different strain. It's number 35624. And its activation is at the gut barrier. So what we found is that 35624 has been around for 25 years, has hundreds and hundreds of studies on what it does. It's been very well known as a transient probiotic for IBS, diarrhea, and constipation. And it's the most recommended GI by gastroenterologists for constipation and diarrhea. And by itself, it has about a 30 to 40% success rate on reduction in quality life. What we found, though, is when we put both of those two together and did a human clinical trial of actually reestablishing the gut brain, reducing depression, reducing anxiety, reducing chronic cortisol, while taking that other strain, it blew up the success of that 35624 strain. Putting those two together for constipation or diarrhea all of a sudden became more than 50% successful in total resolution and almost 80% successful in quality of life change, which I mean, it fundamentally was like, oh my goodness, when you fix the entire issue, it becomes very much more successful and kind of like you're saying, as a sharpshooter. It's another example of how doing in plot product human clinical trials can tell you and other practitioners and the general public what to expect, but also touches again on that just because it has the same genus and species name, that number at the end very much changes what the actual bacteria does. But
Good.
yeah, that was
Awesome.
my little sorry about that. I
Yeah, no,
forgot a little
I
bit
love it.
extra.
No, because no, it's helpful for me also because yeah, because it's always good for another pass for myself for sure. Thanks.
And I think where you were going, the next one you were talking about the vaginal microbiome and that little avenue that we've now in the last 12 months ventured down. Or is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, yeah. It's just a we could land there as a last piece. It's
Sure.
just another example of something that's more predictable and specific, right? As in targeting.
Yeah, there's lots of general ways you can handle things, and there's lots of specific ways you can handle things. The underlying cause, what we've found in all of our research in general overall at Microbiome Labs, is when you fix the gut itself, which is what Megaspore does, literally end inflammation around the body as much as possible and make a garden in the gut that functions the way it's supposed to, then everything else gets better. So even with the psychobiotics, you want to fix the gut as well. We got to that problem because the gut wasn't making those things correctly to handle that situation. We see it in the skin as well with our clinical trial on Megaspore. We started noticing things in our clinical trials on XYZ, and we noticed improvements in those same participants in the clinical trial that weren't related. So for instance, on the skin, we saw acne decrease and skin elasticity increased and skin overall health and wrinkles get better. And we went, well, what happens when the gut makes butyrate at the right area and sends butyrate to the skin because the skin can't make butyrate? Guess the skin has what it needs to actually heal itself. All of our different bodies have their own micro environment themselves. They have their own microbiome in the skin. Your mouth has a microbiome. That is one of the big hot topics now is the oral microbiome and its effect on the entire body. It gets most of its microbes from the gut. There was a great paper just got released. I saw it this morning for the first time, so I haven't read through, on the upper respiratory, your sinuses and esophagus, and what species are. They finally finished classifying what species should be there. That hadn't been done before. Nobody had really looked into the sinus to see what bacteria should be living there in a healthy sinus. And now we know that. And what they found, all those ones that are there come from the gut. It was
Hmm,
like, well, yeah,
for sure.
you fix the gut and you can actually be able to do that. Vaginal canal's the same way. The vaginal balance that we came out with, there's lots of good women's health probiotics on the market that do lots of different things, but we went after it the same way we went after the gut, which is what does that environment look like when it's healthy? And that environment healthy has one of four state types, one of four species of lactobacillus as the one, hopefully one and only, but one of a few strains. The gut should have lots of different things and be balanced. The vaginal microbiome should have one, ideally, strain of lactobacillus that makes lactic acid, hydrogen peroxide, and biosurfactants. And that's what maintains homeostasis of the vaginal canal. And the female hormone estrogen makes glycogen, and glycogen is the food source for that lactobacillus. And it makes a cycle by that functionality pre-menopause that keeps everything or premenopause and post-puberty, that time frame in balance. When that microbiome turns dysbiotic and we don't have the D-lactic acid and the hydrogen peroxide and the biosurfactants, that gives a window for things like yeast and Gardnerella and other pathogens to make a home and change the pH, and it becomes an environment that can be infected or be overrun.
Basically, what you just said was when the estrogen in one sequence, when the estrogen falls out, then there isn't the production of fuel source, the glycogen, to feed the bacteria that make up this healthy environment. And so the environment becomes imbalanced, and then we have the dominoes start to fall.
Exactly. Or an intervention has happened that caused the lactobacillus to go away. So even if we're making enough estrogen, which making enough fuel source, and say, for instance, we take a Z-Pak or we do an antibiotic treatment, the lactobacillus in the vaginal canal is highly susceptible to any antibiotic. It is one of the most killed off species. And if that's brought down low enough, just, someone gets a virus, there's lots of reasons and good reasons why people should take antibiotics. I'm not against antibiotics, but when that happens, it knocks that level down. Well, here's a big problem. When that's there, you're not making lactic acid, you're not making the hydroperoxide. If Gardnerella or something else, yeast or something comes in, they eat that fuel source from estrogen as well. So then we have a environment where estrogen's making garden or making glycogen, and it's feeding the pathogen and not the lactobacillus. And then we have an overgrowth. And unfortunately, the main way to handle that up until now is always do an antibiotic and try and just wipe it out again and hope everything grows back the right way this time.
Or commonly, people are taking probiotics when they're taking antibiotics. I mean, for me, there's a lot of patients in our office practice who, they're not total mainstream, but they're enthusiasts, but mild enthusiasts, and so they
Mhm.
may not even be taking probiotics regularly. But then
Yeah.
when they're taking antibiotics, they're going to take a probiotic.
Yeah. And the hard part with is, and I will say, for a blanket statement, go to your healthcare practitioner and find one that survives. Most probiotics are killed off by antibiotics. You want to rebuild after. Luckily, that's one of the reasons we have Restore Flora. Saccharomyces boulardii and spores are both antibiotic resistant, so you can take them alongside an antibiotic regimen and protect. The Bacillus subtilis HU58 I talked about actually makes a biofilm to protect commensal bacteria so the antibiotic doesn't kill them off. That's phenomenal for being able to protect and reduce antibiotic associated diarrhea. In the vaginal canal, though, that's going to get wiped out. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use antibiotics by any means. And it doesn't mean that every time that's going to turn into a pathogen overload. And it doesn't mean that you should, and by no means am I claiming use vaginal balance instead of an antibiotic for cold or flu. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what we were able to show with that product is we have these lactobacillus species that don't need to be a suppository, but we found specific strains, again, a specific number of that lactobacillus that when taken orally somehow know to go from the gut to the vaginal canal. And we actually showed a 200% increase of those exact strains within 5 days of taking them orally. So they know they're supposed to go there. And once they're there, they start making D-lactic and L-lactic acid and hydroperoxide. And so we
Or could
do
it be secondary signaling to those bacteria to proliferate and grow?
so that we do know once there, the person is if the female is still making estrogen, premenopausal, and still making estrogen to make the fuel source glycogen, that it will feed that lactobacillus and it will stay. That at the very beginning when we first started talking, I said there are some bacteria that will actually rehabitate, and so 60 to 90 days of that rehabilitation by orally taking those strains actually does rebalance that vaginal microbiome post an antibiotic use or post an infection so that it can continually stay in a homeostasis.
Yeah, we just may not know. I'm guessing we don't know for fact that the bacteria is traveling from the gut to the vaginal
We don't know
microbiome.
exactly how it gets there. We do know that we've done the study showing that those strains didn't exist in a human vaginal microbiome. We showed introduction of that strain orally, and then showed a 200% increase of that specific strain in the vaginal canal within 5 days of that same human. So we know they make it there. We just don't know the mechanism, whether it's perforating the gut barrier and going, whether it's translocating from exterior. I know that's not a fun little topic that it's locating from outside the gut microbiome to the vaginal microbiome, but we know it does make it there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so it's called vaginal balance,
Mhm.
right? And this is another example of the probiotic, if you will. It's another example of something that is very specific with an intentional target of we understand how to the extent that we just discussed, a mechanism of how it works, the predictable outcome, and in this case, again, in contrast to a sort of broad probiotic for gut health as a whole. In this case, it's a specific type of probiotic with a specific type of strain and a specific number and everything with the strain type to affect that outcome.
Yeah,
In
very
this
much
case, for
so.
women who have recurring, we've talked about this at least once, if not twice over, but specifically for women who have recurring, well, we could just say generic vaginitis as inflammation of the vaginal tissues or recurring bacterial vaginosis
Recurring
or
UTIs.
other indications,
Yeah. Um,
right?
yeah, it's exactly your typical. person that might say I might want to take this with somebody who has issues with those type of things, UTIs, vaginoses, those type of, and what we're really doing is we're reestablishing that vaginal microbiome so that the environment itself can take care of itself in the future. It can protect itself, but at the same time, it can help eliminate some of those things as well. But
And
yeah,
this one is also more of a transient at this point, not a spore. It's not a spore, obviously. So
no, it's not a spore, and it
yeah.
is transient through the GI tract, but it does know to translocate down to the vaginal canal where if there's still estrogen making the fuel source for it, it will stay there and keep repopulating. In the GI tract, no, it will not stay there in the GI tract and start commensulating.
But if so, is there any awareness that if a woman is taking this, then if they stop the vaginal balance, then is there still a healthier vaginal environment for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or whatever, or don't know
Yeah,
right now?
so that's the nice part about this one. It is one of those few probiotics that will uh, maintain itself there. So typically, 60 to 90 days would be the length of time to take the probiotic for. And if still making estrogen, that strain will stay dominant in the vaginal microbiome post that, as long as there's estrogen to make a fuel source for it to feed itself and keep recreating. It's one of the few ones that can actually show it does that.
And as far as we know right now, what's been studied as far as how far out is that still the case?
It depends on the study you're talking about. The study you're talking about. We Without getting in a bunch of different weeds, it should last forever. We actually have on some specific strains in our pregnancy support where we've shown that those probiotics are actually passed on through a vaginal birth to a baby. And then when nursed, are still seen 7 years out in the child. So there are specific strains that have been documented to stick around. It's just not the majority of what you're going to see on the shelf that can be that resilient and stick around for that long.
But
It's not the typical in probiotics.
right, right. But to be clear, with vaginal balance as a product, we could say to patients like, you take this for like 3 months, and then you can call it quits. And we're anticipating with more predictable outcome, the majority of women, you're not going to need to necessarily continue this. Now, if they start to fall into symptomatic patterns like before, then all right, they might be an outlier, or yeah, we may just have to cycle and do it again for 1 to 3 months or something like that. But yeah, the nice thing is this isn't like a forever thing necessarily. Again,
No,
assuming there's some estrogen there, et cetera.
yeah. Assuming there is some estrogen there. At the same time, you also have to look, as with any type of treatment of anything, you have to look at external factors.
Sure, of
If
course.
someone is living a lifestyle that's going to basically reoccur or you'll cause the exact same problem or the same situation in their health as happened before, then you can ongoingly take it. And as you said, with people that are, we do have a study where women who had ongoing candida overgrowth for the yeast infections reoccurrent regularly for over 2 years that were given over the course of a year. Half were given a placebo and half were given part of our vaginal balance. And then halfway through the study, they flipped, and the part that got the probiotic got the placebo, and the other half. Out of the majority of the women in the study, those that got the probiotic in the first half of the year dropped out because they refused to go on the placebo because they'd never gone 6 months without a yeast infection in years. They were literally like, "I'm not stopping this," and they were going to keep continue. And they're like, "This is my daily probiotic from now on."
Understandable.
Yeah, but for the general population, that's not an ongoing issue where genetics or other internal things are happening. Yes, 60 to 90 days should last, and as long as things stay the same and the environment stays the same, yeah, it should be good to go.
That was a pack lot of info, Ben. I kind of assumed it would be, but I loved it. I learned as I usually do from you for sure.
Thank
And
you.
we talked through yeah, so like a broad based. So it was very much gut health, microbiome based, but we kind of anticipated that. And then we started from the more broad based picture to these specific target outcomes, which was awesome. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I hope everybody enjoyed a little bit of it. I didn't, but this is my very first podcast, so I hope
Really,
I went well.
that was awesome, fantastic.
Good, 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 good. Is there anything else?
I'm honored to be like to think of it as like that was the first time because that was awesome.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I'm not the person who likes to jump in front of the camera. I'm typically the person taking cameras or videos, and then there people watch it afterwards and say, "No, let's do that again," and somebody else do it.
I don't know. When we're talking with you, like, yeah, you know how to spearhead and lead the charge, and in our conversations. So, just again, kudos to you for following your own life path with your own heart and your direction in life. I'm not just blowing smoke at you. You know this. We think extremely highly of you. Colleagues I know who know you think extremely highly of you. This is after all that. I gotta imagine there's people listening going like, he was in construction management first. Like what? Like how is like the guy is like a brainiac. I mean, yeah. So look, keep following your own life pattern, beating to your own drum. You're doing a great job. We very much appreciate you on behalf of RootSeek. So and again now kind of pivoting toward the audience again. The goal of this kind of conversation, as I said, is information education, of course, number one. But number two, it's more, this is how we sort of reflecting the other practitioners that I work with as colleagues at RootSeek specifically, especially rootseekhealth.com. This is how we think through a lot of the complexities of what's in functional medicine. It's not a one size fits all. It's not even always a predictable outcome, but there's so many more tools and options than in the conventional world. We focus very much today here with you, Ben, on the microbiome topic, but also the extensions of gut health into so many other areas of health. And so thanks for kind of giving us that information. And again, if you're a patient who you've never worked with a functional practitioner, but you have interest, you can reach us at rootseekhealth.com. If you are looking for a second opinion, we don't want to create fragmentation and too many cooks in the kitchen, et cetera. But if you are not getting enough support that you need for any number of reasons, we will respectfully be happy to come alongside you also and be privileged to do so. Again, you can reach us at rootseekhealth.com. And we're focused on our mission values of being accessible, being virtual across the country, being affordable. We know what our colleagues what their cost structures are like as well, and we're dedicated to keeping costs low. And we have a very big focus on community and power in numbers, working as a team, working with folks from a multifaceted approach, so that we can bring the best of all worlds. Because look, we as practitioners, or me as a doctor, we kind of suck at a lot of areas of healthcare. All right. And then there's other folks who are non-prescribers. They're limited in some of their scope of practice. So we've come together as a team to bring sort of like the best of all worlds to the table to help people get better faster. That is our mantra: to help sick people get better faster, and to help those who are longevity minded to continue thriving for longer. So everything that you talked about here today, Ben, in some way or another, whether we specified or not, I think is really applicable to our audience, our patients. So I just honor you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm so honored that this was your first time. I'm kind of bewildered that was your first time, but thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it's not my first time talking.
No.
I definitely have. I got into this. I got out of construction because I was better at talking than I was at engineering and math. No, and if you ever want me back on again, if I did that well, I'd happy. I really did enjoy this, Dr. Mark. So yeah, if you ever wanted to have me back on or have another topic, I'd definitely do this again. Maybe you're just not good of a host though. Maybe I don't want to.
I love it because it's like, we try to keep this we sketch it out, but it's conversational, it's informal. We see where it goes organically, but we're not like going looking for people just randomly to fill spots, right? We're looking for people who we know who they are and what they bring to the table. And there's a reason I asked you, right? And just again, that was flying colors. I can't believe it was your first time doing a podcast. So thanks for entertaining me. And yeah, I'm not one who feels like we got to keep rotating new people all the time. Yeah, there's great value in not just consistency and knowing what we're getting, but also it's about the quality of the person in your shoe, and you more than clicked all those boxes. Yeah, we'll do this again.
Good.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much.
Yeah, you enjoy. Hey, by the way, get home safe.
Emotional piece. Okay,
Yeah.
this is not at the risk of sounding whatever, but we did this the other time with Leah, with the other company as well. So we're going to do this. We have no financial affiliation with Ben and Microbiome Labs in some kind of direct kind of way at all. But for those folks who are listening here, if you are interested in using any of those, let's say those three products we kind of talked about, okay, Mega Spore-Biotic, the all-encompassing sort of heal the gut, repopulate the gut, Spore-Biotic, Mega Spore-Biotic, Zen Biome, any of the three, right? Cope, sleep,
Cope, sleep, or dual, or cope, sleep, or
and dual.
gut brain reset.
Any of those three, the Zen Biomes, and then the third one, the vaginal balance. If anybody has interest in using those, send us a direct message through our website or through the podcast link, and yeah, we'll get you that for a 30% discount. I think that's the max we are allowed to do through FullScript. So we'll send you a discount for product for 30% if you're hearing this within a 3-week period, a 3-week period of the launch of this recording. Is that fair, Ben?
You are a generous, generous man, Dr. Sue. Very much
30%,
so.
3 weeks is the number 3. I don't know. We could have said 6 or 7, but we won't go there.
No, that's more than generous. That's really nice. I appreciate you having faith in those products. I know you've used some of those as well before yourself.
Yeah,
In your
for sure.
practice. I appreciate you offering that to your listeners and your watchers very much.
Yeah, good stuff. It's good stuff. We trust it. All right. We're going to click off here. Thanks so much, Ben, again.
Have a good one, Dr. Sue.
All right.